What if everything you thought you knew about the world and its mysteries turned out to be wrong? What if there are things out there so chilling, so inexplicable, that they remain unsolved, no matter how hard we try? Today, we are diving into some of the world's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. From unspeakable crimes to haunting legends, we will explore the stories that continue to baffle us. Now, you might think you have heard it all before, but trust me, these cases will make you question the boundaries of reality itself. If you love a good mystery, you are in the right place. Get ready, because we are about to reveal some shocking and eerie stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. 1. John Wayne Gacy, The Mystery of Body 10. John Wayne Gacy was one of the most infamous serial killers in U.S. history. In the 1970s, he was convicted of the brutal murders of 33 young men and boys. Most of his victims were lured into his home with promises of work or money. Gacy then tortured, sexually assaulted, and murdered them, concealing their bodies under his house, in the crawl space, and around his property in Norwood Park, Chicago. It was not until late 1978 that authorities uncovered the scale of Gacy's horrors. During an investigation, a disturbing discovery was made beneath his home. Authorities unearthed 29 bodies hidden in the crawlspace and several others around the property. Among these was a body that would come to be known as Body 10. On December 26, 1978, authorities discovered Body 10, a skeletal remains of a victim who had been buried deep within Gacy's crawlspace. The body had been long decomposed, with only bones remaining. Forensic examiners determined that the remains belonged to a white male between 17 and 21 years old and around 5 feet 7 to 5 feet 11 in height. There were no soft tissues left to help identify the cause of death, but it was not hard to imagine the horrific circumstances that led to the victim's untimely end. What was unsettling was the distinct clues that were uncovered in the victim's bones. A healed fracture in the left collarbone and dental fillings suggested that this individual may have had a normal life before his death. These clues pointed towards a possibility the victim might be identifiable. Authorities began speculating that this victim, who seemed to have been killed sometime around mid-1977, was one of Gacy's later victims, before his final spree in 1978. The discovery of Body 10 triggered an extensive investigation to uncover the victim's identity. The remains were examined thoroughly by forensic dentists, and the victim's teeth were charted in detail. At the time, dental records were the primary tool for forensic identification, and authorities began to compare the teeth of Body 10 to those in missing persons reports. To aid in identifying the victim, forensic artists even created a clay reconstruction of what he may have looked like in life. Despite these efforts, however, the identity of Body 10 remained a mystery. In the first year following Gacy's arrest, no one came forward to identify the victim. As Gacy's trial began in 1980, 28 victims were identified, but Body 10 remained nameless, and investigators had to refer to him as John Doe 10. Authorities continued to release descriptions of the unidentified victims in hopes that someone would recognize them. Over time, people who had lost loved ones in the mid-1970s came forward, hoping that one of Gacy's victims might be their missing son or brother. But after many leads, none of them turned out to be the breakthrough that was needed. For years, the case of Body 10 remained unsolved, even though new theories continued to surface. One theory suggested that Body 10 might not have been one of Gacy's later victims, as originally believed. Some speculated that the victim might have been murdered as far back as 1972, making him one of Gacy's first victims. The idea was based on Gacy's own statements during his trial, where he claimed that his second victim was buried near the first victim's remains. Investigators also noted that the location of Body 10's grave in the crawlspace was near the first known victim's grave, leading to the possibility that the two might be connected. However, there were doubts about this theory. Prosecutors argued that Gacy likely did not have any victims between 1972 and 1975. Especially while his wife was living in the house. Regardless, investigators remained determined to uncover the victim's identity. By 2011, new advancements in forensic science offered hope. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart launched an initiative to use cutting-edge DNA technology to revisit the cases of Gacy's unidentified victims. Over the years, DNA testing had evolved, and investigators were now able to extract DNA samples from remains that had previously been overlooked. These samples were sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, which specialized in difficult forensic cases. Through this initiative, significant breakthroughs were made, and 3 victims were identified through DNA testing and genetic genealogy over the following decade. The most recent identification came in 2021, when DNA analysis helped identify one of the victims as Francis Wayne Alexander, a man from North Carolina. With this progress, the number of unidentified victims shrank, but Body 10 remains one of the 5 victims whose identity has not yet been discovered. In a 2023 interview, Sheriff Dart stated that his team had at least one promising lead regarding Body 10. While there is still no certainty, investigators remain optimistic that the mystery of Body 10's identity may soon be solved. DNA technology continues to evolve, and it is believed that genetic genealogy could be the key to solving this case. The authorities remain committed to identifying Body 10, not only because it is a matter of justice, but because he was someone's child, someone's friend, or perhaps a brother. The search for his identity continues, even after nearly 50 years. The case of John Wayne Gacy is not just a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity, it is also a testament to the perseverance of law enforcement and forensic experts in their efforts to bring closure to the families of victims. The fact that Body 10 has remained nameless for so long is a haunting reminder of the tragedy and the deep emotional toll it takes on the families who never get the answers they so desperately need. Imagine the heartbreak of never knowing what happened to a loved one. In the case of Gacy's victims, many families have lived with this pain for decades. They continue to hope that one day they will receive the call that answers the question that has haunted them for so long: what happened to their son, brother, or friend? The mystery of Body 10 is just one example of how a single unanswered question can torment a family for a lifetime. Point 2. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. The ghostly legends. There are places that remain etched in the public imagination, not because of their historical significance, but because of the stories they inspire. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, located just outside of Chicago, is one of those places. While it may seem like just another old cemetery at first glance, it is anything but ordinary. This small, isolated burial ground has become synonymous with paranormal activity, and its eerie reputation continues to draw curious visitors from all over the world. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery's history dates back to the early 1800s. Located in Rubio Woods, a forest preserve, the cemetery once served as the final resting place for local settlers, many of whom were buried there in the 1830s and 1840s. But it was not long before the cemetery began to take on a more sinister reputation, fueled by the strange occurrences and ghostly legends that began to surround it. The origin of the name Bachelor's Grove is steeped in local folklore. One version of the story suggests that the name was derived from a group of unmarried men who settled the area. These bachelors, as the story goes, created a unique community, and the cemetery was established as a final resting place for them. However, local historians offer a more grounded explanation. According to their research, the name likely comes from the Bachelor family, who lived nearby and were one of the early settlers of the region. Regardless of the origin, by the mid-1800s, Bachelor's Grove was an established cemetery, and it would continue to serve as such for decades. As the years passed, Bachelor's Grove Cemetery began to experience a slow decline. In the 1850s, the construction of a new railroad bypassed the area, and residents, drawn by the promise of better transportation options, began to relocate. Businesses and families moved to larger towns with better access to the railroads, and as a result, the settlement around Bachelor's Grove began to dwindle. By the 1900s, the once thriving cemetery had become neglected, and the final burial took place in 1989. Without regular caretakers, the cemetery became overgrown, and its tombstones started to show signs of decay. The cemetery's isolation, combined with its neglect, soon turned it into a hidden, forgotten place. In the latter half of the 20th century, the cemetery became a gathering spot for local teens and thrill seekers, many of whom used it as a location for late-night parties and mischief. Unfortunately, this only added to its deteriorating condition. The abandonment of Bachelor's Grove Cemetery did not come without consequence. As the years went by, vandals began to target the cemetery. Tombstones were toppled, broken, and even stolen. The cemetery, once a serene resting place, became scarred with graffiti and damage. In a disturbing act of desecration, broken grave markers were even found in the nearby pond, It was not just the physical damage that made Bachelor's Grove notorious. The abandonment of the cemetery created the perfect environment for the stories of strange and inexplicable occurrences to take root. And as the years passed, these ghostly tales grew in number, adding to the cemetery's already eerie reputation. By the 1950s, stories of strange happenings at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery began to surface. Locals spoke of eerie, unexplained sights in the woods. As the cemetery's decline accelerated, so too did the number of reports of paranormal activity. Teenagers and young adults, many of whom visited the cemetery for the thrill of the unknown, began to recount bizarre experiences, such as the sight of figures in the distance and strange noises echoing through the night. The legend of Bachelor's Grove truly gained traction in the 1970s, when the cemetery was featured in various paranormal investigations and stories. As the rumors and ghostly tales spread, the cemetery became one of the most famous haunted locations in America. This only added to the mystique of the cemetery, attracting more visitors, paranormal enthusiasts, and ghost hunters who were eager to uncover the truth behind the tales. One of the most enduring legends associated with Bachelor's Grove is the apparition of the phantom farmhouse. Visitors have reported seeing an old-fashioned farmhouse glowing in the distance between the trees. The farmhouse is often described as a white, two-story structure, with a porch light shining brightly. However, as onlookers attempt to approach the building, it begins to shrink and fade until it vanishes completely. The phantom farmhouse has no confirmed historical counterpart on the property or in the surrounding area. Yet countless witnesses over the years have reported seeing it. Skeptics argue that these sightings could be the result of psychological phenomena, such as the power of suggestion or optical illusions. However, for those who believe, the phantom farmhouse remains one of the most captivating aspects of Bachelor's Grove's haunted legacy. Arguably the most famous ghostly apparition to haunt Bachelor's Grove is the White Lady, often referred to as the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. The White Lady is described as a figure in a flowing white dress or shroud, often seen drifting through the cemetery at night. Some witnesses report seeing her holding an infant in her arms, and many encounters with her occur on clear nights with a full moon. Local legend suggests that the White Lady is the spirit of a young mother buried in the cemetery, a woman who died alongside her child. One of the graves in Bachelor's Grove is marked with the simple inscription, "Infant Daughter," and it is believed that this grave is connected to the White Lady's story. According to the legend, the White Lady is eternally searching for her lost child, and her ghostly presence serves as a symbol of the deep connection between a mother and her child. The legend of the White Lady of Bachelor's Grove reached new heights in 1991 when a group of paranormal investigators with the Ghost Research Society visited the cemetery and captured a remarkable photograph. Using infrared film, the team snapped a picture of the cemetery during the daytime. When the photograph was developed, it revealed a translucent figure of a woman sitting on a broken tombstone, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, with long hair. The researchers who took the photograph swore that no living person was in the cemetery at the time the photo was taken. This image quickly became one of the most famous ghost photographs ever captured and was widely circulated in newspapers across the United States. For believers in the supernatural, the photo served as proof that the White Lady's ghost was real, and her presence had been caught on film. For skeptics, however, the photograph was dismissed as an anomaly or an outright hoax. While the White Lady photograph remains an iconic part of Bachelor's Grove's ghostly lore, skeptics have offered several explanations for the eerie occurrences in the cemetery. One of the most common theories is that the strange lights and figures reported in the cemetery could be the result of misinterpretation. The cemetery's isolation and eerie atmosphere could easily play tricks on the human mind, especially when combined with the power of suggestion. Some skeptics argue that what people interpret as a ghostly figure may actually be a result of misidentified objects, like tree stumps or other natural features in the fog. Similarly, the so-called orb lights that visitors report seeing could be caused by swamp gas or reflections from nearby light sources. In fact, many of the strange lights observed at Bachelor's Groves have been captured on film by photographers. But skeptics point to these images as evidence of natural phenomena rather than the supernatural. The psychological explanation for the haunting of Bachelor's Grove is rooted in what is known as residual energy. This theory posits that the emotional intensity of past events can leave an imprint on the environment, replaying like a recording. In the case of Bachelor's Grove, the violent acts of vandalism, the sorrow of the people buried there, and the eerie atmosphere could have created the conditions for such residual energy to manifest as ghostly phenomena. According to this theory, the phantom farmhouse and the White Lady are not interactive spirits, but rather impressions of past events playing out over and over again. Another mystical theory that has gained traction among paranormal enthusiasts involves ley lines. Ley lines are supposed to be invisible lines of energy that crisscross the Earth. Some believe that locations situated at the intersection of ley lines are prone to supernatural occurrences. Bachelor's Grove, with its history and eerie occurrences, is sometimes considered to be located at one of these intersections, where the veil between the physical world and the spirit world is thinner. For skeptics, the haunting of Bachelor's Grove can largely be explained by the power of suggestion. The cemetery's reputation as a haunted place, combined with its creepy atmosphere and abandoned state, primes visitors to expect something strange to happen. When people visit Bachelor's Grove, they may unconsciously interpret natural occurrences, like rustling leaves or distant lights, as paranormal events. The mind, it seems, is quick to make sense of the unknown by filling in the gaps with familiar narratives, ghost stories. In this view, Bachelor's Grove is a classic case of a haunted location being fueled more by the expectations of those who visit than by any real supernatural activity. However, for those who have experienced something strange firsthand, the line between the supernatural and the psychological remains blurred. The story of Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is one of mystery, folklore, and perhaps the human tendency to find meaning in the unknown. Whether you believe in the haunting tales or not, there is no denying the eerie draw of this cemetery, where the legends continue to live on, just as the mysteries of the place remain unsolved. 3. The Rose Lady, a grim discovery. On May 31, 2018, in a quiet neighborhood in Cincinnati, Ohio, a chilling discovery was made. At a playground near an apartment complex in the North Avondale neighborhood, a group of locals stumbled upon a shallow grave. The body of an older woman was uncovered, lying in a position that suggested she had been there for some time. Yet it was the haunting detail that accompanied her remains that made this case so puzzling. The woman had a single rose delicately placed on her chest. This mysterious discovery quickly captured the attention of the local community and law enforcement. The woman, who was soon dubbed the Rose Lady, was buried in an unmarked grave, with no identification on her body. She had been wrapped in cloth, and the lack of identification made it nearly impossible for authorities to solve the case. The rose, placed so tenderly on her chest, hinted at a personal connection, but no one could make sense of it at the time. The Hamilton County Coroner's Office took charge of the investigation, conducting a thorough autopsy to determine the cause of death. Early results pointed to an overdose as the likely cause, rather than foul play. There were substances found in her system, which indicated she had died from an overdose, but there was still no clue as to her identity. With no identification and no immediate leads, the investigators began to focus on finding out who this woman was. They collected fingerprints and DNA from her remains, comparing them against national databases, but came up empty. No matches were found, and the case remained frustratingly cold. The Rose Lady's identity was a mystery that haunted both the local community and the investigators tasked with solving the case. As months turned into years without any breakthrough, the Hamilton County Coroner's Office decided to launch a public outreach campaign. The authorities released a composite sketch of the Rose Lady's face, hoping that someone in the community might recognize her. Later, a 3D clay reconstruction of her likeness was commissioned in an attempt to offer a more lifelike depiction of the woman. Despite these efforts, the case seemed to hit a dead end. The Rose Lady's name remained unknown, and authorities were no closer to identifying her than they had been in the early days of the investigation. The haunting image of the older woman with a rose on her chest seemed to be a symbol of unfulfilled answers, leaving the case to linger as one of Cincinnati's most baffling, unsolved mysteries. Then, in 2023, the breakthrough that investigators had been waiting for came, thanks to the advent of investigative genetic genealogy (DNA) testing, which had been available for some time but had not been applied to this case, was now a tool that could help crack the cold case wide open. The Hamilton County Coroner's Office partnered with forensic experts to trace potential relatives of the Rose Lady using DNA analysis. The efforts were slow at first, but eventually a promising lead emerged. DNA from the Rose Lady's remains was found to match with a family tree that included a man who had died of an overdose in 2019. After further analysis, it was confirmed that the man was the Rose Lady's son. The DNA analysis finally led to the revelation that the Rose Lady was, in fact, Patricia Keena Goodwin. She was 71 years old at the time of her death, and she had been living in the Mason, Ohio area before she vanished in 2018. Patricia had become homeless in her later years, which made it difficult for investigators to track her down or connect her to any known missing person cases. The news of Patricia Goodwin's identification came as both a relief and a heartbreak to her family. They had been searching for her since her disappearance, but their quest for answers had been clouded by uncertainty and despair. Tragically, Patricia's brother, who had long hoped for news about his sister, passed away just a month before her identification was made public. He never learned what had happened to her. Despite the sorrow of her family, there was a sense of closure for them, as they could finally put her name to the mystery that had haunted them for years. Yet the circumstances of Patricia's death raised even more questions, particularly the manner in which her body had been disposed of, and the rose placed upon her chest. Investigators pieced together the likely sequence of events that led to Patricia's death. Patricia had been living on the streets in the years leading up to her death, struggling with addiction and homelessness. It appeared that Patricia's son, Jason, had been with her when she overdosed. A friend from their homeless encampment later confirmed that Jason had been present at the time of his mother's death. It was believed that, in his grief and desperation, Jason had made the decision to secretly bury his mother rather than alert authorities. The rose placed on Patricia's chest was seen as a final act of love from her son. Despite the tragic circumstances surrounding her death, the rose was a poignant symbol, a sign that someone cared. Tragically, Jason passed away the following year, which meant that the full story behind the Rose Lady's final moments may never be completely understood. What makes the Rose Lady's case particularly haunting is not just the mystery of her identity, but the deeper human story behind it. Patricia's death, while tragic, was tied to her struggles with addiction and homelessness. Her son, in his grief, made a heartbreaking decision to bury her himself, without anyone knowing. The mystery of the Rose Lady is a reminder of the hidden stories behind every cold case stories that often remain untold because of circumstances that are difficult to uncover. For the families of missing persons, these cases are often a source of endless pain. Even when a name is finally attached to a cold case, the emotional toll on the family does not disappear. For Patricia Goodwin's family, the mystery may have been solved, but the pain of their loss remains. The role of modern forensic technology in solving cold cases like the Rose Lady's is a testament to how far investigative science has come. DNA testing and genealogy have become invaluable tools for solving cases that were once considered unsolvable. But as we have seen, these advancements are not just about solving a crime. They are about giving families the closure they deserve. In a way, Patricia's story is one of both loss and redemption. Through the tireless work of investigators and the power of technology, her identity was finally revealed, but the emotional cost of her death and the circumstances surrounding it will remain with her family forever. Point 4. Hong Kong acid attacks. A city in fear. Between 2008 and 2010, a series of bizarre and terrifying acid attacks wreaked havoc on one of Hong Kong's busiest shopping districts. In 4 separate attacks, a total of 130 people were injured. The attacks seemed random and senseless, causing fear and panic across the city. This kind of crime, especially in such a seemingly safe and orderly place, was deeply unsettling. People were left wondering, who could be behind these attacks, and what was their motive? The perpetrator, or rather the mad tosser, as the media would later call them, had a chilling modus operandi. They would throw plastic bottles filled with a corrosive acid, believed to be drain cleaner, from rooftops onto the crowds below. The victims, unsuspecting pedestrians, were caught in the immediate chaos as the acid splashed onto their skin, causing burns and injuries. But what made these attacks even more frightening was the randomness of the violence. There was no discernible pattern to the victims, and the attacker appeared to be playing some kind of twisted game with law enforcement. The first attack took place on December 13, 2008, in the heart of Hong Kong's busy shopping district, around 5:15 p.m. During the peak of the holiday shopping season, the streets were filled with people. 2 plastic bottles filled with acid were tossed from a building onto Sai Yung Choi Street, a popular pedestrian shopping area. The bottles exploded upon hitting the ground, sending acid spraying into the crowd. In total, 46 people were injured in this first attack, though fortunately, all the injuries were minor. The crowd's panic was immediate, and shoppers scrambled into nearby stores, where store employees quickly poured water on the floor to neutralize the acid. Despite an intense police search that lasted deep into the night, no one was caught. The attack was so swift and unexpected that the culprit disappeared into the night, leaving no trace behind. The brazenness of this attack shocked the city, and it raised several terrifying questions. Who could carry out such a random, violent act? Why target pedestrians with no apparent motive? Just 5 months later, on May 16, 2009, another acid attack occurred, this time near the location of the first. 2 more acid-filled bottles were hurled from a rooftop in broad daylight, injuring 30 people. The city was still reeling from the first attack, and the timing seemed almost deliberate. The streets were crowded with people again, and the attacks had begun to take on a chilling regularity. Local government officials, including Hong Kong's chief executive, visited the scene and urged authorities to expedite the installation of surveillance cameras in the area. But while the cameras would soon be installed, they would not be as effective as expected. The surveillance footage from the scene yielded no leads, and the perpetrator continued to elude capture. A reward for information was offered, in hopes of uncovering any clue that might lead to the attacker's identity. Yet despite the heightened efforts, the authorities still had no clear leads. The panic among residents grew. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Who was behind these attacks? And why were they targeting innocent people? On June 8, 2009, the third attack took place. What made this attack even more unsettling was the fact that it happened just hours after the installation of new CCTV cameras in the area. 2 more bottles filled with acid were tossed onto the crowd, injuring another 24 people. The timing was incredibly bold, almost as if the attacker were mocking the authorities. The police had just installed the cameras to try to catch the person responsible, but the attack happened so quickly that the authorities were left once again without a suspect. In the aftermath of the attack, around 300 police officers were dispatched in a manhunt, but the culprit was nowhere to be found. At this point, it seemed that the mad tosser was not only bold but deliberately taunting law enforcement. The police had no solid evidence or suspects, and the question of motive remained unanswered. The fourth and final acid attack took place on January 9, 2010, at the Temple Street Night Market, another bustling area in Hong Kong. 2 bottles filled with acid were again hurled onto the crowded market, injuring around 30 people in the process. As the panic spread through the area, a quick-thinking bystander managed to block the exits of nearby buildings to prevent the attacker's escape. However, despite the quick action, the police were not able to apprehend anyone at the scene. This attack was different because it was during the night market, where the crowds were dense, and the atmosphere was even more chaotic. As the market was a well-known tourist destination, the attack also put the spotlight on Hong Kong's reputation as a safe, orderly city. No one could have predicted that something so senseless and random could happen in such a public space. After this fourth attack, police arrested a man in his 30s who was found hiding on a rooftop nearby. He was carrying bottle caps that matched those used in the acid attacks. However, after a lengthy questioning, it was revealed that this man was not the attacker. He was an illegal immigrant who had been squatting in the area. This turn of events further complicated the investigation and cast doubt on the police's ability to solve the case. In the aftermath of the attacks, police threw massive resources into investigating the mad tosser. The authorities scoured the city, checking rooftops, stairwells, and windowsills for any evidence. They even reenacted the incidents, tossing test objects from various heights to determine the likely trajectory of the falling bottles. Despite this intense effort, investigators were still left with no concrete evidence. The anonymity of dense crowds and the attacker's ability to disappear into the maze of buildings made it nearly impossible to catch them. The Hong Kong police admitted that the lack of clear links between the victims and the absence of any eyewitnesses made it incredibly difficult to find a suspect. In the meantime, various theories began to emerge about the motives behind the attacks. Theories ranged from gang-related revenge to an individual driven by personal frustration and the desire to cause chaos. However, the authorities could not connect any of these theories to the actual crimes. The identity of the attacker remained a mystery, and with no clear answers, the case became one of Hong Kong's most unsettling, unsolved crimes. Several theories have emerged over the years, attempting to explain the attacks. One popular theory suggested that the attacks were the work of a triad gang member. seeking revenge, possibly for law enforcement crackdowns on vice activities in the area. However, experts quickly dismissed this theory. It did not make sense for a gang to carry out such random acts of violence in public spaces, as it would only draw unwanted police attention. Another theory proposed that the attacker was a lone individual, driven by personal frustration or a desire to inflict pain on others. This idea gained traction among psychologists, who suggested that the attacker might have been seeking a sense of power and control by causing chaos in the lives of strangers. The randomness of the attacks seemed to support the idea of an individual acting alone, with no clear motive other than to disrupt and terrorize the city. Some more speculative theories suggested that the attacks could have been an elaborate plot to increase the presence of surveillance systems in Hong Kong's public spaces. Hong Kong, at the time, was a relatively democratic city, but there were ongoing debates about the extent of surveillance. This theory, though without evidence, suggested that the attacks could have been orchestrated to create public support for the installation of more cameras in the city. However, this remains purely speculative. Despite years of intense investigation, the Hong Kong acid attacks remain unsolved. The authorities' efforts to catch the perpetrator have yielded no results, and the case remains open. Theories abound, but none of them have led to a definitive conclusion. The city of Hong Kong, once known for its safety and orderliness, continues to live with the terror of the unknown attacker, whose motives and identity remain a mystery. The random nature of the attacks, and the lack of any clear suspects, make this case one of the most unsettling, unsolved mysteries of the 21st century. What drove the attacker to carry out such violent, random acts? And why were they never caught? 5. The Red Ghost. Arizona's Wild West legend. In the remote desert of southeastern Arizona, a legend emerged in the late 19th century that would haunt the region for years to come. It was a creature so mysterious, so terrifying, that it became the subject of campfire tales and whispered rumors. This beast, known as the Red Ghost, was said to be a massive, blood-red creature with enormous cloven hooves and a human skeleton strapped to its back. It terrorized the Arizona frontier, leaving behind only massive hoofprints and long red hair as evidence of its existence. But what was the Red Ghost? Was it an actual creature, or was it the result of exaggerated frontier tales passed down over generations? The answer is both a mystery and a bit of a Wild West tall tale, shaped by the unique environment and the colorful characters of the time. The Red Ghost first gained notoriety in the spring of 1883, when a gruesome incident occurred on a ranch near Eagle Creek, Arizona. 2 ranchers had left to tend to their livestock, leaving their wives behind on the property. As one of the women stepped outside to fetch water, she heard the frantic barking of dogs, followed by a piercing human scream. She rushed to the window and saw a gigantic, reddish beast stampeding past, carrying what appeared to be a devilish rider on its back. The woman, terrified, immediately barricaded the door. When the ranchers returned that evening, they discovered the body of the other woman trampled in the mud. Enormous cloven hoof prints were found all over the area, and long strands of coarse red hair clung to nearby bushes. But the beast had vanished, leaving the ranchers and the community in shock and confusion. Over the next few weeks, more reports of the Red Ghost surfaced. Miners working in the area claimed that they had been assaulted in the dark by a giant red creature. A freight wagon train was reportedly attacked by the beast at night, with the same distinctive hoof prints and tufts of red hair found at the scene. As the legend grew, so did the embellishments. Some locals swore the creature could vanish like a specter when pursued, while others claimed it had devoured a grizzly bear. These exaggerated tales, while not entirely believable, became part of the lore that surrounded the Red Ghost. One of the most consistent elements of the legend was the skeleton strapped to the creature's back. Eyewitnesses described the beast as carrying a human skeleton tied in place with ropes or rawhide. The skeleton was often depicted as a bleached, skeletal remains of a person who had been long dead. This gruesome detail only added to the mystique of the Red Ghost and solidified its place in Arizona's frontier mythology. The turning point in the Red Ghost legend came when a group of prospectors spotted the beast on a distant mesa. Armed with rifles, they attempted to bring the creature down. Although they missed, they noticed something fall from the Red Ghost's back as it fled. When they approached, they found a human skull, with bits of dried flesh and hair still clinging to it. This discovery seemed to confirm the terrifying nature of the beast. It was not just a myth or a wild exaggeration. It was a real creature that had been carrying the remains of a human. The skull found by the prospectors added an undeniable element of horror to the tale, as it raised the chilling question: who was the person whose remains had been strapped to the creature's back? As the story of the red ghost grew, many began to suspect that the beast was not a supernatural creature, but rather a wild animal of some sort. Over time, a more plausible explanation emerged. The red ghost might have been a camel. In the mid-1800s, the United States Army had experimented with using camels as pack animals in the desert. The Army had imported camels to the Southwest, hoping they would serve as sturdy pack animals capable of carrying supplies through the harsh terrain. However, the camels proved difficult to handle, and they scared off other animals. As the Army abandoned the Camel Corps during the Civil War, many of the camels were sold off, or simply released into the wild. By the 1880s, sightings of feral camels in Arizona were not uncommon. In fact, some historians believe that the red ghost was one of these abandoned camels, now living wild in the desert. The long red hair, strange appearance, and the skeleton strapped to its back could all be explained if the creature was, in fact, a camel that had gone feral. According to the traditional version of the red ghost story, the creature's reign of terror came to an end in 1893. A farmer in Arizona spotted a massive red camel grazing on his property. The farmer, armed with a rifle, shot the animal, killing it. Upon examining the dead camel, the farmer discovered rawhide straps still wrapped around its body. This discovery seemed to confirm the theory that the red ghost was not a supernatural beast, but rather a feral camel that had once been used by the Army. The discovery of the rawhide straps, along with the camel's death, marked the end of the red ghost's terror. The beast was no longer a threat to the Arizona frontier. However, the question remained: whose bones had been strapped to the camel's back, and how did they get there? With the red ghost's death, the mystery of the skeleton remained unresolved. Several theories emerged regarding the identity of the person whose remains had been tied to the camel. One of the most popular explanations was that the skeleton belonged to a prospector who had died in the desert. According to this version of the story, the prospector had lashed himself to the camel in the hopes that it would lead him to water. Tragically, the camel had wandered off into the desert, leaving the man to die of thirst and exposure. Another theory proposed that the skeleton was the result of a more sinister act. Some suggested that a cruel individual had tied the man to the camel and sent him into the desert, knowing that he would perish. This theory painted a grim picture of human cruelty, rather than a tragic accident. Despite these theories, the truth behind the skeleton remains unknown. The mysterious circumstances surrounding its death, and the camel's connection to it, have only added to the intrigue of the red ghost legend. Today, the red ghost is often seen as one of the most enduring legends of the American Wild West. The creature has been immortalized in books, movies, and folklore, and it remains a fascinating example of how myths and legends are born from real events, though they often grow into something far larger than life. While the tale of the red ghost may have been exaggerated over the years, it is rooted in the harsh realities of the Arizona desert. The presence of feral camels, the mysterious skeleton, and the strange behavior of wild animals all contributed to the development of this eerie story. The red ghost, like many other legends of the American frontier, serves as a reminder of the untamed wilderness and the unpredictable nature of life in the Wild West. The red ghost is a fascinating example of how legends take shape in the minds of people living in rugged, unforgiving landscapes. The combination of real events, such as the presence of feral camels, and the harsh conditions of the desert, creates a perfect environment for the birth of myths. Over time, these stories take on a life of their own, evolving and growing with each retelling. The red ghost is a reflection of the Wild West itself, untamed, mysterious, and full of strange occurrences that have yet to be fully explained. It is a reminder of how human imagination can transform the mundane into the extraordinary, weaving stories that capture our attention and curiosity for generations. Point 6. Derek Lucking, a vanishing without a trace. The case of Derek Lucking is one that baffles investigators and captivates anyone who hears it. On a crisp March morning in 2012, Derek's white Ford Escape was found abandoned at the Newfound Gap Overlook in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, just outside of Cherokee, North Carolina. Derek, a 24-year-old man from Louisville, Tennessee, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a chilling note that simply read, "Don't come find me." Derek had been a responsible young man, a recent college graduate, and, to all accounts, a normal person. But something had changed in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. He had become withdrawn, and those who knew him began to notice that he was not acting like himself. His sudden disappearance, coupled with the ominous note, raised more questions than answers. The last confirmed sighting of Derek was on the early morning of March 17, 2012. Surveillance cameras at a motel in Cherokee caught him in the lobby at around 4:00 a.m. He checked out and walked into the early morning darkness carrying a small day pack. This was the final time Derek was seen alive. When Derek's parents arrived in Cherokee later that morning, they learned that they had just missed him. They found his hotel room empty, with a Bible on the bed and an empty liquor bottle on the floor. These objects suggested that Derek had been struggling, emotionally, possibly wrestling with some inner turmoil. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Derek had been preparing for an outdoor excursion. His car was filled with camping gear maps, a survival guide, a sleeping bag, a tent, and other supplies. However, all these supplies were left behind in his car, and Derek had only taken a small pack with him into the wilderness. His wallet, identification, and cash were also left behind. The discovery of these items suggested that Derek had walked into the woods voluntarily, but for reasons that remained unclear. Derek's disappearance prompted an immediate and intense search. Park rangers, volunteers, and search dogs combed the popular trails around the Newfound Gap area, calling his name and looking for any sign of him. But despite the fact that the park was filled with visitors that day, no one had seen Derek on the trails. The searchers expanded their efforts into the rugged woods surrounding the area. Derek, an inexperienced outdoorsman, had only taken a small day pack with minimal supplies, which made his situation precarious. After days of searching the steep ridges and creek valleys, not a single trace of him was found. As the days turned into weeks, and no sign of Derek emerged, the official search was scaled back. Despite the best efforts of the search teams, Derek had seemingly vanished without a trace. His disappearance became one of the most puzzling and haunting cases in the Great Smoky Mountains. The mystery surrounding Derek's disappearance has sparked many theories, but none have offered definitive answers. One of the leading theories suggests that Derek, in a distressed state of mind, had decided to vanish and start a new life. The note he left behind, telling people not to come find him, seemed to support this theory. Perhaps he was overwhelmed by his life and felt the need to escape. His sudden withdrawal from his family and friends, coupled with the emotional turmoil he was experiencing, suggested that Derek may have been in a fragile mental state. Some believe that the note was a final message, a goodbye to those he loved. In this view, Derek may have staged his disappearance, planning to slip away from the life he had known. Another theory is that Derek was struggling with a mental health crisis and went into the wilderness intending not to return. There were signs that Derek had been dealing with some personal issues in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. He had been drinking more than usual and acting strangely, which could point to a deeper emotional struggle. The Bible and empty liquor bottle found in his hotel room suggested that Derek may have been seeking some form of spiritual solace or courage before venturing into the wilderness. It is possible that Derek, feeling lost and overwhelmed, decided to end his life in the remote wilderness of the Great Smoky Mountains. The secluded area where his car was found was a place where he could disappear and avoid being found. However, the lack of any remains or other clues has left investigators uncertain about this theory. The fact that no trace of Derek was found, despite extensive searches, leaves this theory open to debate. A more unusual theory posits that Derek's disappearance was the result of a personal survival challenge. Derek was reportedly a big fan of Bear Grylls, the popular television survival expert known for his show Man vs. Wild. Perhaps Derek, inspired by Grylls, decided to test his own survival skills by venturing off the beaten path with minimal supplies. While this theory seems plausible on the surface, it does not fully explain why Derek would have left behind so many supplies in his car. If he was intending to survive in the wild, why would he leave behind essential camping gear like a tent and sleeping bag? Moreover, the terrain of the Smoky Mountains is unforgiving, especially for an inexperienced hiker. It is possible that Derek underestimated the challenges of the wilderness, which could have led to an accident or mishap. Some have speculated that Derek's disappearance may have involved foul play. This theory suggests that Derek could have encountered someone with bad intentions while hiking in the Smokies. Perhaps he stumbled upon an illicit activity, or met a dangerous individual while alone in the wilderness. However, there is no evidence to support this theory. Derek's car was found with all of his personal belongings intact, including his wallet and cash, which suggests that robbery or an attack for financial gain was not the motive. Additionally, there were no signs of a struggle or any witness reports that suggested foul play. Investigators have therefore considered this theory the least likely, though it cannot be completely ruled out. As of today, Derek Lucking's disappearance remains a mystery. Despite the extensive search efforts, no sign of him has been found, and the case remains open. Theories abound, but none offer concrete answers. The mystery of Derek's fate continues to haunt his family, who remain desperate for closure. What happened to Derek? Did he disappear voluntarily, seeking a fresh start? Or did he fall victim to a tragic accident in the wilderness? Was his disappearance the result of a personal crisis? Or is there something more sinister at play? These questions remain unanswered, and the haunting mystery of Derek's disappearance endures. Derek Lucking's case is a tragic reminder of the deep emotional toll that unresolved disappearances have on families. For years, Derek's family has lived with the unknown, wondering what happened to their son and brother. Despite the passage of time, they continue to search for answers, holding on to the hope that one day, they will find out the truth. The mystery of Derek's disappearance raises difficult questions about mental health, personal struggles, and the lengths people may go to in order to escape their reality. It also serves as a reminder that sometimes, even with all the resources available to us, some mysteries remain unsolved. The pain of not knowing can be just as intense as the fear of what might have happened. Precognition, the ability to perceive or know future events before they happen, is one of the most perplexing and intriguing phenomena that has captivated human imagination for centuries. Rooted in myths, religious beliefs, and even scientific investigations, the idea that the future can be known ahead of time raises many questions about the nature of time, consciousness, and human perception. Is precognition a genuine phenomenon, or is it simply the result of coincidence, psychology, or flawed interpretation? In this segment, we will explore the concept of precognition, from its historical origins to its modern scientific investigation. We will look at both the anecdotal evidence that supports the idea and the skeptical arguments that question its validity. By the end of this discussion, you will have a deeper understanding of why precognition continues to fascinate people around the world. The concept of foreseeing the future can be traced back to ancient civilizations, where individuals who claimed to have the ability to predict future events were highly revered. In ancient Greece, for example, people would seek guidance from the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle, believed to channel the god Apollo, was thought to possess the ability to foresee future events. People from all walks of life, from kings to commoners, would visit the oracle to gain insight into everything from personal matters to state affairs. Similarly, in ancient Rome, augurs, priests who interpreted the will of the gods, would observe the flight patterns of birds to predict the future. These augurs were seen as conduits between the divine and the earthly realms, and their predictions were highly regarded. In these ancient societies, precognition was deeply embedded in religious and spiritual practices, and those who could predict the future were viewed as powerful and knowledgeable figures. Across Asia, precognition is also found in the traditions of Hinduism and Buddhism. In these spiritual systems, enlightenment and heightened consciousness were believed to grant insight into the future. The concept of divine sight in Hinduism, for example, allows certain individuals to see into the future or access knowledge that is beyond ordinary human experience. Similarly, in Buddhism, meditation and mindfulness practices were thought to provide glimpses of future events, leading to a deeper understanding of the world and one's place in it. In both Western and Eastern religious traditions, the ability to foresee future events is often attributed to divine intervention or spiritual enlightenment. For example, in Christianity, figures like Joseph and Daniel are described as possessing prophetic abilities. Joseph, the son of Jacob, interpreted Pharaoh's dreams in the book of Genesis, predicting 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Daniel, a prophet in the Hebrew Bible, also interpreted dreams and visions, providing insight into future events that would affect kingdoms and rulers. These biblical figures were not just revered for their wisdom. They were seen as having a special connection to God that allowed them to see beyond the present moment. Their precognitive abilities were often framed as a form of divine guidance, serving to warn people or provide them with critical information for survival. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the rise of the spiritualist movement in the West brought renewed interest in psychic phenomena, including precognition. Spiritualists believed that certain individuals, known as mediums, could communicate with spirits and receive messages about the future. Many of these mediums claimed to have the ability to foresee events or provide detailed information about what would happen in the days, months, or even years to come. With the rise of scientific inquiry, the belief in precognition began to shift from a spiritual or religious phenomenon to a subject of psychological and scientific exploration. Researchers in the 19th and 20th centuries began to investigate whether there was any empirical evidence to support the existence of precognition. One of the most notable early proponents of studying precognition was the British philosopher and psychologist William McDougall. In the early 1900s, McDougall conducted experiments that suggested individuals might be able to perceive future events. However, these findings were criticized by some of his peers, and his research was met with skepticism. In the latter half of the 20th century, researchers in the field of parapsychology began to conduct more systematic studies of precognition. One of the most well-known studies was conducted by psychologist Joseph B. Rhine at Duke University in the 1930s. Rhine conducted experiments using cards with different symbols on them, and participants were asked to guess which symbols would appear on a card. Rhine's research suggested that some individuals performed better than chance in predicting the symbols, which led him to propose the existence of psychic abilities, including precognition. Since then, various scientific studies have been conducted to test the validity of precognition. In the 1970s, psychologist Dean Radin conducted experiments in which participants were asked to predict random future events, such as the outcome of a computer-generated random number sequence. Radin's research indicated that participants were able to predict future events with a slightly better than chance accuracy, though these results have been met with skepticism due to the challenges of replicating such findings. In recent years, some scientists have attempted to explain precognition through the lens of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is a branch of physics that deals with the behavior of particles at the subatomic level, and it has led to some surprising discoveries that challenge our understanding of time and reality. One of the most intriguing aspects of quantum mechanics is the concept of non-locality, which suggests that particles can be instantaneously connected to each other, regardless of the distance separating them. This concept has led some theorists, including physicist Roger Penrose, to speculate that the mind might be able to tap into a non-local field of information that transcends the conventional flow of time. According to this theory, precognition could be the result of the mind accessing information from the future through quantum entanglement. While this idea is still highly speculative and controversial, it has generated a great deal of interest in the scientific community. If true, it would mean that the mind is capable of perceiving events before they happen, potentially reshaping our understanding of time, consciousness, and reality itself. While some scientists and proponents of parapsychology continue to explore the possibility of precognition, many skeptics argue that there are more mundane explanations for seemingly precognitive experiences. According to critics, what people perceive as precognition is often the result of cognitive biases, pattern recognition, and subconscious processing. One of the most well-known cognitive phenomena related to precognition is the concept of confirmation bias. This occurs when individuals remember events that confirm their beliefs, while forgetting or dismissing events that contradict them. In the case of precognition, people might recall a time when they dreamed about an event that later occurred, but they fail to remember the many times when their dreams did not come true. This selective memory reinforces the belief in precognition, even when the evidence is inconclusive. Psychologists also argue that human brains are naturally wired to look for patterns, even in random events. This is known as apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated phenomena. For example, if someone dreams of a car accident and then hears about a car accident the next day, their brain might interpret the event as precognitive, even though it could simply be a coincidence. Despite the intriguing evidence and the theories put forth by scientists and researchers, the question of whether precognition is a real phenomenon remains unresolved. While some studies suggest that people may have a slight ability to predict future events, these findings are often inconsistent and difficult to replicate.
Critics of precognition argue that the phenomenon is a product of psychological mechanisms, such as pattern recognition, cognitive biases, and random chance. They contend that what people interpret as precognition is simply a result of the brain's natural tendency to make connections between events, even when those connections are not meaningful. The concept of precognition continues to be one of the most fascinating and mysterious aspects of human perception. Whether it is a genuine phenomenon or simply a byproduct of our cognitive biases and psychological mechanisms, it raises profound questions about time, consciousness, and the limits of human knowledge. While the debate over the reality of precognition remains ongoing, one thing is certain: it taps into our deepest desires to understand the unknown and to gain insight into the future. Whether we believe in it or not, the idea of seeing the future before it happens will continue to capture our imagination and challenge the boundaries of what we believe is possible. Point 8. Conclusion. The unsolved mysteries that haunt us. As we wrap up our exploration of these 8 disturbing unsolved mysteries, it becomes clear that the unknown continues to have a powerful grip on our collective consciousness. From unsolved murders to eerie legends, the mysteries we have discussed today have one thing in common: they all leave us with more questions than answers. In many ways, our fascination with the unknown is a reflection of our own fears, hopes, and desires. Whether it is the gruesome crimes of John Wayne Gacy, the ghostly tales of Bachelor's Grove, the heartbreak of the Rose Lady, or the enigmatic disappearance of Derek Lucking, each of these mysteries touches on something deeply human. They confront us with the limits of our knowledge and challenge our understanding of what is possible. The role of mystery in human nature. Humans are naturally drawn to the unknown. It is part of what makes us curious, inventive, and constantly seeking to understand the world around us. From ancient civilizations that believed in omens and oracles, to modern scientific investigations into paranormal phenomena, the search for answers to unsolved mysteries has been a constant theme throughout history. Why are we so captivated by unsolved mysteries? Perhaps it is because they allow us to explore the boundaries of our understanding, to push the limits of what we think we know. These mysteries force us to confront the unknown and to question the assumptions we make about the world. They remind us that, no matter how advanced our technology becomes, or how much knowledge we accumulate, there will always be things beyond our grasp. What makes these mysteries even more compelling is the emotional impact they have on those involved. For the families of victims like Body 10, the Rose Lady, or Derek Lucking, the search for answers is not just a matter of curiosity, it is a matter of closure. The unanswered questions, the haunting possibilities, and the unresolved grief all contribute to the pain and frustration experienced by those left behind. In the case of Body 10, the lack of identity is a profound tragedy, not only for the victim but also for the family, who may never know what happened to their loved one. Similarly, the Rose Lady's case is a heartbreaking reminder of the many people who go missing and remain unidentified, their stories lost to time and circumstance. For Derek Lucking's family, the agony of not knowing what happened to him is an emotional burden that no amount of searching can truly lift. Theories abound, but no one can say for sure whether he left of his own volition or whether something more sinister occurred. Despite the emotional toll that these unsolved mysteries take on individuals and communities, there is something undeniably hopeful about our continued search for answers. Whether it is through advancements in forensic technology, like DNA testing and genetic genealogy, or the tireless work of investigators, families continue to hold on to the hope that, one day, they will find the answers they have been seeking. In many of these cases, progress is being made. The use of DNA technology has solved decades-old mysteries, and the identification of Body 10, though still unresolved, is part of a larger trend of cold cases being solved through scientific advancements. Similarly, the identification of Patricia Goodwin, the Rose Lady, shows how modern technology can offer closure, even when the path to answers is long and uncertain. The same applies to the case of Derek Lucking. Although his whereabouts remain unknown, the investigation into his disappearance continues, and his family remains committed to uncovering the truth. This persistence in the face of uncertainty is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the belief, even when faced with the unknown, we must keep searching. In addition to the human desire for closure, many of these unsolved mysteries tap into our fascination with the supernatural and the unexplained. From the ghostly apparitions at Bachelor's Grove to the terrifying idea of precognition,
These mysteries force us to confront the limits of our understanding of reality. Are these phenomena real, or are they products of our imaginations?
Bachelor's Grove, in particular, serves as a prime example of how a place can take on a life of its own, fueled by both the stories people tell and the eerie atmosphere it creates.
The legend of the White Lady and the Phantom Farmhouse are part of a rich tradition of ghost stories that have fascinated people for centuries. Even if the stories are not true in a literal sense, they continue to resonate with those who visit the cemetery,
adding to its allure. Similarly, the concept of precognition challenges our understanding of time and perception. If it is real, it would change everything we know about the flow of time and the possibility of knowing the future.
While skeptics argue that precognition is simply a trick of the mind, there is still a sense of wonder about the possibility of being able to foresee what is yet to come. So, what does the future hold for unsolved mysteries? The search for answers will undoubtedly continue, driven by both the human desire for knowledge and the emotional need for closure.
New technologies, like genetic genealogy and advancements in forensic science, will continue to play a crucial role in solving cold cases and providing answers to families who have been left in the dark.
At the same time, our fascination with the supernatural and the unknown will continue to fuel stories, legends, and theories. Whether it is a ghostly apparition or a strange disappearance, there will always be mysteries that elude us. And the search for answers will remain a fundamental part of the human experience.
In the end, perhaps the most unsettling thing about unsolved mysteries is not the lack of answers, but the fact that they make us confront the limits of what we know.
They remind us that there is still so much we do not understand about the world, about time, and about human nature. While we may never solve all of these mysteries, the journey itself is part of what makes them so compelling. The search for answers, the exploration of the unknown, and the curiosity that drives us forward will continue to shape our world for years to come. And perhaps, in some cases, the mysteries themselves are the answer, reminding us that some questions may not need to be solved to be meaningful.